March 2025, the Oval Office. Cameras click, microphones lean forward, and standing at the center of the room is the President of the United States, about to confirm something that, until that moment, officially did not exist. Not a concept, not a rumor, not a future proposal buried inside a Pentagon slide deck. An actual fighter aircraft, one that had already been flying for years, since 2020, hundreds of flight hours, tested, refined, iterated, all without a single confirmed photograph reaching the public. The aircraft was called the F-47, America's first 6th-generation fighter. While the world watched China parade prototypes across social media, while analysts debated whether 6th-generation fighters were even necessary, the United States had already moved past the argument. The jet was real, and even the images released to the public were admitted to be deliberately misleading. Air Force officials openly joked that foreign intelligence agencies were wasting time trying to reverse engineer fake renders. This wasn't just another fighter jet. This was a $300 million flying quarterback, designed to command drone formations, penetrate enemy airspace more than 1,000 miles deep, and bring technologies online that make the F-22 look like a relic of a previous era. But what makes the F-47 truly different isn't just what it is, it's how it came to exist so quickly, and what that speed reveals about how air warfare is changing faster than most people realize. This is not a concept aircraft. One of the most important things to understand about the F-47 is this: it was never a PowerPoint airplane. For decades, the Pentagon has been criticized for unveiling futuristic jets that exist mostly on slides, sleek renderings, ambitious timelines, bold promises, only to spend years, sometimes entire decades, trapped in development limbo. Programs that look revolutionary on paper, but never fully materialize in the real world. That is not what happened here. Long before the name F-47 was ever spoken in public, long before any announcement, long before analysts even suspected a new airframe was coming, experimental aircraft were already flying, quietly, under deeply classified research contracts. Full-scale X-plane demonstrators, built by competing defense contractors, took to the skies without fanfare, without press releases, and without public acknowledgement. Not mock-ups, not wind tunnel models, not scaled test vehicles, real aircraft. Aircraft carrying real engines, real sensors, real stealth shaping. The first of these demonstrators flew in 2019. The second followed in 2022. Together, they accumulated hundreds of flight hours, pushing beyond theory and into reality, validating next-generation propulsion concepts, testing advanced stealth geometries, experimenting with sensor fusion, autonomy, and data sharing, and maturing the core technologies that define what 6th generation actually means. This was not exploration for exploration's sake. This was deliberate validation. And all of it happened while the public conversation lagged far behind reality, while debates raged over whether 5th generation fighters were still enough, while think tanks published white papers arguing cost, relevance, and necessity, while commentators questioned whether air superiority itself still mattered in a missile-dominated world. Test pilots were already flying the answer. This matters because it fundamentally changes how we should interpret everything that comes next. The F-47 did not appear suddenly. It did not emerge out of urgency or panic. It surfaced only after years of quiet validation, hard data, and real-world flight experience, long after the most dangerous questions had already been answered in the air. The announcement that shook the defense world. When the Pentagon finally made its move public, the reaction inside the defense industry was immediate. Shock, not quiet surprise, not cautious optimism. Shock. Boeing had just won the most important fighter contract in a generation, a decision that instantly sent ripples through the entire aerospace and defense community. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. For decades, Lockheed Martin had effectively owned American stealth aviation. They delivered the F-22 Raptor. They built the F-35 Lightning II. They defined what 5th generation air power looked like. The assumption was simple. When the 6th generation arrived, Lockheed would build it too. But this time, the Air Force chose differently. And that choice spoke volumes. The engineering and manufacturing development contract alone was valued at more than $20 billion before a single production aircraft was even delivered. This wasn't seed money. This wasn't an exploratory grant. It was a commitment. And more importantly, this wasn't a promise of future capability. This wasn't a mock-up rolled out for cameras. This wasn't a digital model waiting for technology to catch up. Senior Air Force leadership stood in front of cameras and confirmed something that caught even seasoned analysts off guard. The aircraft's technological foundation had already been proven in flight years earlier. The shock wasn't just about who won the contract, it was about what had already happened behind closed doors. While the world assumed the race hadn't truly begun, the United States hadn't just entered it. It had already completed multiple laps, quietly testing, refining, and validating a fighter that was no longer theoretical, no longer speculative, but already real. Why the program was paused and why it survived. In 2024, the entire Next Generation Air Dominance program hit the brakes hard. This was not a minor slowdown, not a quiet adjustment behind closed doors. It was a deliberate pause at the highest levels of the Air Force. Not because the program had failed, not because the technology didn't work, not because the aircraft couldn't deliver what it promised in flight, but because it was expensive. Early projections showed each aircraft potentially reaching nearly 3 times the price of an F-35, numbers that immediately set off alarms inside the Pentagon, on Capitol Hill, and across the defense budget community. At that scale, cost is no longer an accounting problem. It becomes a strategic question. That kind of price tag forces a moment of reckoning, not just about affordability, but about necessity. So the Air Force did something rare for a program of this importance and momentum. It stopped, and it looked inward. Senior leadership ordered a comprehensive internal review designed to answer a single uncomfortable question. Was this capability truly essential for future warfare, or was there another way to achieve the same outcome? Every alternative was put on the table. More F-35s, different force mixes combining 4th and 5th generation aircraft, new operational concepts built around long-range missiles, space-based systems, cyber capabilities, or unmanned platforms operating alone. Nothing was off limits. The analysis was exhaustive, brutally honest, grounded in threat assessments rather than optimism. And when it was complete, the conclusion was blunt. There was no viable alternative. In highly contested airspace, against peer adversaries equipped with modern layered air defenses and their own emerging 6th generation aircraft, nothing else could guarantee air superiority. Not incremental upgrades to existing fighters, not cheaper platforms optimized for permissive environments, not theoretical concepts that looked promising on paper but had not yet been proven under real operational conditions. Only NGAD. The decision to move forward was not driven by emotion, tradition, or institutional pride. It was strategic, a cold assessment of future battlefields, adversary capabilities, and what it would take not just to operate, but to survive and win in those environments. And once that decision was made, there was no hesitation. It was final. Secrecy and speed, the gap no one can close. Here's where the F-47 becomes truly unusual. Not just in what it is, but in how deliberately it has been hidden. China has flown its 6th generation prototypes in broad daylight. Videos circulate online within hours. Aviation enthusiasts freeze frames, trace silhouettes, debate engine inlets, and tail geometry. Europe openly showcases demonstrators for its future combat aircraft programs. Press events, official renders, carefully released specifications. Russia speaks publicly about next-generation interceptors, teasing capabilities years before anything is operational. The United States did none of that. No confirmed photographs, no public demonstrations, no air show appearances. Only 2 official renderings. And even those came with an unusual admission. Air Force officials openly acknowledged they were misleading. Not inaccurate, not incomplete, misleading. That level of deception is not accidental, it's doctrine. It reflects a long-standing American approach to preserving technological advantage, one that prioritizes operational surprise over publicity. The same philosophy that allowed earlier classified aircraft to fly real missions for years before the public ever learned their names. Programs hidden not because they were fragile, but because they were ready. The F-47 sits at the very top of that classification pyramid. And what makes this secrecy even more unsettling is the timeline it conceals. Defense programs are not supposed to move this fast. In theory, modern acquisition takes decades. Requirements, debates, budget fights, development delays, testing phases that stretch endlessly. Yet the timeline tells a very different story. 2019, the first experimental aircraft flies. 2022, a second demonstrator validates the next stage of technologies. 2025, production preparations already underway. 2028, first official flight targeted, early 2030s, operational service. This is not incremental progress, this is acceleration, a pace that contradicts almost everything we think we know about how advanced military aircraft are built. And when secrecy and speed exist together at this scale, it stops being impressive. It becomes strategic, because it suggests that by the time the world finally sees the F-47 clearly, it may already be far too late to catch up, especially for America's adversaries. Range and power, the foundation of modern air dominance. Combat radius defines reality, not in theory, not in simulations, in real war. It determines how far a fighter can go, what it can reach, and whether it can come back without exposing everything that supports it. The F-22 Raptor can reach roughly 590 nautical miles unrefueled. The F-35 improves that slightly, extending reach but still operating within a familiar envelope. The F-47 changes the equation entirely. It exceeds 1,000 nautical miles, unrefueled. That is not an incremental improvement, that is transformational. In the Pacific theater, range is the difference between survival and vulnerability. It determines whether tanker aircraft can remain outside threat envelopes or are forced dangerously close to contested airspace. It determines whether forward bases can be defended or must absorb the first wave of enemy strikes. It determines whether fighters can strike deep targets without dragging an entire, fragile support network into harm's way. The F-47 allows operations from bases that are actually defensible, positioned far from enemy reach, while still penetrating deep into the most heavily contested airspace on the planet. With aerial refueling, its operational envelope expands even further, turning vast distances into manageable battle space. This is not about distance for its own sake, it is about freedom of action, and none of that freedom exists without propulsion. The engine is not just a component of the F-47, it is the program. The aircraft is powered by adaptive cycle engines, propulsion systems designed to change how they behave in real time based on the demands of each phase of flight. High efficiency during long cruise segments, maximum thrust when combat demands it. A third airflow stream opens and closes dynamically, optimizing performance rather than forcing designers to accept permanent compromises. Traditional engines demand trade-offs. You choose speed or range, thrust or efficiency. The F-47 refuses that choice. It delivers Mach 2+ speed, sustained supercruise, and the ability to move rapidly across enormous distances without sacrificing endurance. In modern air combat, speed is survival. It allows fighters to close distance, reposition, and disengage on their own terms. But speed without range is a liability. Fast jets with short legs run out of options quickly. The F-47 brings both into the fight. Range that rewrites air warfare, power that makes it possible, stealth beyond invisibility. Stealth is no longer binary. It is no longer a simple question of being seen or not seen, detected or undetected. 6th generation stealth operates across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, addressing every way a modern battlefield tries to find, track, and target an aircraft. Not just radar, but infrared, electronic emissions, thermal signatures. The F-47 is designed to remain low observable not against a single sensor, but against entire layered sensor networks. Systems that combine multiple radar bands, infrared search and track, passive receivers, and data fusion to close detection gaps. This is a fundamentally different challenge than anything 5th generation aircraft were designed to face. Infrared suppression, in particular, matters more than ever. Modern heat-seeking weapons and infrared tracking systems have become extraordinarily sensitive, capable of detecting minute temperature differences against complex backgrounds. A faint thermal plume that once blended into the sky can now betray an aircraft's position. Reducing that signature can mean the difference between being tracked and being ignored, between being targeted and passing through unseen. But stealth is not just about how an aircraft performs on its first mission. Equally important is sustainment. Earlier stealth aircraft achieved remarkable low observable performance, but often at the cost of enormous maintenance effort. Preserving those characteristics required specialized facilities, intensive labor, and long downtimes between flights. The F-47 is designed to change that equation. It is built from the start to preserve low observability while maintaining high sortie rates, to stay stealthy not just in theory, but in sustained combat operations. Because stealth that works only on paper or only on day one is useless. This is stealth designed for war. The quarterback and his team. Here's the real revolution. Not speed, not stealth alone, command. The F-47 is not designed to fight alone, it is designed to command. At the center of the formation, the F-47 functions as a flying quarterback, not just executing maneuvers, but directing the fight as it unfolds. Around it will fly collaborative combat aircraft, autonomous, AI-enabled drones built to operate alongside a manned fighter in contested airspace. These are not simple remote-controlled platforms. They carry weapons, advanced sensors, electronic warfare payloads. They scout ahead, they jam enemy defenses, they strike targets, they absorb risk that would otherwise fall on a human pilot. They extend the formation's reach beyond what any single aircraft could achieve on its own. They overwhelm enemy defenses through mass, coordination, and deception. One manned fighter commanding multiple unmanned teammates changes the math of air combat entirely. Combat power no longer increases linearly, it multiplies. Instead of counting individual fighters, the Air Force counts formations, teams, networks, integrated systems working as one. Decisions are shared across platforms. Sensor data is fused in real time. Tactics are executed simultaneously rather than sequentially. This is no longer traditional aviation. It is system-level warfare, where dominance is achieved not by a single aircraft, but by the orchestration of an entire combat ecosystem, moving and fighting as a unified whole. Cost, commitment, and what the F-47 really means. Yes, the F-47 is expensive. There's no way around that. Early estimates place the cost near $300 million per aircraft, a figure that immediately triggers criticism, scrutiny, and comparisons. Critics ask the same question every time. Why not buy more F-35s instead? Why invest so heavily in a relatively small number of aircraft? The answer comes down to mission. The F-47 is not a general-purpose fighter. It is not designed to do everything. It is designed to do one thing exceptionally well: guarantee air superiority where nothing else can survive. This aircraft exists for the worst-case scenarios, the environments where airspace is saturated with layered air defenses, where adversaries field their own advanced fighters, and where 5th-generation platforms may no longer be enough. Without air superiority, nothing else works. Not strike operations, not logistics, and not naval power, not ground forces. Every modern military capability depends on control of the skies. And when that control is contested at the highest level, incremental solutions stop mattering. Only dominance does. From that perspective, the cost stops being the central issue. It becomes the price of access, the price of freedom of action, the price of ensuring that American forces can operate where others cannot. And that brings us to what the F-47 really represents. This aircraft is more than a fighter. It is a statement. While other nations reveal concepts, prototypes, and promises, the United States flew reality. While debates continued in public forums, the future of air combat was already airborne, tested, refined, and quietly prepared for service. First flight is coming. Operational service will follow. And when the F-47 finally enters the fleet, it will not simply replace an older aircraft. It will redefine what air dominance means in an era of peer competition, advanced sensors, and contested skies. Because if this is what the Pentagon is willing to name publicly, to assign a designation and acknowledge openly, then the real question isn't what the F-47 can do. The real question is what still exists beyond it, and what the United States is not yet ready to admit.